Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's great to be here at this conference in your very beautiful country. Look at it. This presentation is about the stakeholder involvement in the Netherlands. I'm only hoping to inspire you a little bit. Well, yes. This is me. From 2006 until 2013, I was responsible for the engagement of all stakeholders involved in the Dutch national program Room for the River. From 2013 until now, I'm responsible of the engagement of a specific group of stakeholders, policymakers and practitioners in two European projects, FAIR and Building with Nature. I've divided my presentation into four parts. In the first part, I will show you several sheets about the Netherlands and the Dutch national program Room for the River, just to give you an impression on what we have to deal with in our country. I'm very proud to say that Room for the River program was completed in 2016 within budget and on time. The lessons I learned from the Room for the River project success of stakeholder involvement are now incorporated in the two new EU projects Building with Nature and FAIR. And my colleague Tessa Lightenberg will tell you more about those two European projects. In the third part, I will tell you about the principle on stakeholder engagement and involvement. And in the fourth part, I will show you an example of one of Room for the River's project, the project Overdiep, where farmers played a very important role in success of this project. This sheet only shows you where the Netherlands is situated. Our country is densely populated. 17 million people live there, and it's quite small, approximately 42,000 square kilometers. This is the catchment of the River Rhine and the River Meuse. It's a big area, 4 times the Netherlands, and the Rhine is 1,320 kilometers long. You might say we have to deal with a lot of water. Some people say God made the world and the Dutch made the Netherlands. I quite like this saying. Just look at the picture of my country. During the Roman time on the left side, there's a lot of water in our country. During the Middle Ages, in the middle picture, the first lakes were turned into land. We call that new land now polders. To realize this, the Dutch had to work together. This was the start of stakeholder involvement. The third picture shows you the Netherlands in the 21st century and what happens when the dikes break. Half of our country will be flooded. There will be many casualties and the economic costs are very, very high. In this area, 2/3 from our gross national product is generated. I think you understand that flood protection is not controversial in my country. The issue is only how. In 1993 and 1995, we had serious flood risk, damage and evacuations. This great sense of urgency resulted in the start of the program Room for the River. I think you have the same sort of pictures in your country. This is the map of the 34 project of the Room for the River program. I always like to see this project as a necklace of pearls. If one breaks, the whole necklace is broken. So, for the safety of the Netherlands, all projects had to be realized within budget and on time. A very, very big challenge. But we succeeded. We finished this program last year. A big success of the Room for the River program led in the stakeholders' involvement and especially in the community involvement. Before I tell you more about the principle of stakeholder involvement, my colleague Tessa Lightenberg will tell you something about the stakeholder involvement internationally in two European projects. Tessa, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Liesbeth, and good morning, everyone. So, as Liesbeth said, I will tell you about involving stakeholders in two EU projects, Building with Nature and FAIR. In these projects, we applied the lessons learned in the Room for the River program. On the map, you can see the green dots of the Building with Nature project, and the pink dots of the FAIR project. As you can see, they are in countries in the North Sea region. Some of you may know that we tried to get Ireland involved as well, but unfortunately we did not succeed. So I would like to start with explaining the goals of the two projects. Then I will talk about who the stakeholders are and how we are trying to involve them. So at the beginning of the 20th century, a lot of dikes and sluices and storm surge defenses were built. But now after 100 years, they are at the end of their life cycle and they have to be adapted or improved. The problems are that we do not have enough money and time to work on all these assets at the same time. We do not know what the consequences of climate change will be and what kind of new technologies will be invented. But we have to do something, so the countries in the North Sea region joined forces in the Building with Nature and the FAIR projects. These will both produce a framework document. So the FAIR project aims to improve all this infrastructure and plan the management of it, as you can see on the pictures as well. And the Building with Nature project investigates new solutions for flood risk management, such as river restoration or river widening. So both of these projects produce a framework, and the stakeholders in these projects are the policymakers and practitioners who we want to use, who we want to make use of the framework, and we want the framework to be useful and applicable for them. So to do this, we want to involve them as soon as possible in the project and to show that we take their wishes seriously. So how do we do this? In both projects, we have created a policy learning group, which consists of policymakers and practitioners at the organizations involved in the projects. So this group has two tasks. One is to review the framework and to share it with their networks. And in sharing with the networks, they also get input from their networks about what they want and need. So this is benefits for us and for the stakeholders because the framework is better tailored to the needs of the stakeholders, and it will be picked up by the networks. So the networks are more engaged in the framework. This is all I wanted to tell you about stakeholder involvement in these two projects, and Liesbeth will now continue with the principles of stakeholder involvement in the project.
Thank you, Tessa. Sorry. Now I would like to tell you about the 4 principles of stakeholder engagement. The first principle is strong leadership on national, regional and local level. Now, well, this principle is self-evident and very crucial. The second principle is the open-mindedness principle. When during a long process an alternative pops up, the other stakeholders need to accept this. They need to be open-minded and be prepared to examine and accept this. So they all need to incorporate the alternative of the stakeholders in the discussion and be prepared to look through the eyes of the stakeholders. The third principle is the inclusive principle. When a discussion is not in favor of for a stakeholder, they are always allowed to join in the conversation or in the discussion. So engage, involve, and sometimes co-create with the stakeholders and show your trust and see each other's strength. The fourth principle is the responsibility principle. Share knowledge, be transparent with all your information, and defend your choices actively with an open ear. Now, you know the principles of successful stakeholders engagement, but please bear in mind that stakeholder involvement requires a great deal of effort from all stakeholders. It is time and money consuming. The basic finance has to be organized. There has to be a sense of urgency. Celebrate successes together, small and big. And it is an ongoing process. It never ends. When I speak of stakeholders in general, I refer to the 5 stakeholders arenas: the politicians, the civil servants, the media, the consultants, contractors and the knowledge institutions, and the local communities and the NGOs. It is very important that you know their interests, their needs, and their roles. Bear in mind that stakeholders can have personal ambitions. They might like to make a career of it, or they have particular passions. For example, they want to better the world, or they want their political party to win in the next elections. So, with that knowledge, you can make your stakeholder analysis, not just once at the beginning of your project, but many times. For this analysis, you can draw conclusions on how to deal with the stakeholders. How does it work? On the y-axis is the influence and/or power of the stakeholders. On the x-axis is the interest of the stakeholder. In the green square, you put the stakeholders with the least influence and the least power and the least interest. These stakeholders need only to be kept informed with general information, websites, emails, you name it. In the orange square, you put in the stakeholders with most influence, most power, but least interest. These stakeholders need to be engaged and consulted. In the yellow square, you put in stakeholders with least influence, least power, but most interest. These stakeholders are potential supporters of your project. You show them with them consideration and try to involve them. Finally, the red square. These are the stakeholders that have the most influence and most power and most interest. They are your key players in your project. You involve, engage, and consult them. Why should you make the stakeholder analysis quite often? Because the world changes all the time and stakeholders can shift from one square to another. And you don't want to be surprised. For example, there can be an economic reason, cutbacks or other economic priorities, and stakeholders can change. Job rotation by civil servants, for example. In the Netherlands, every civil servant is supposed to change their job within 5 or 6 years. And very important, election can change the whole spectrum again. Let me give you an example of the stakeholder shift in the politician arena. In the Netherlands, politicians are elected for 4 years. Year 1, we call that the honeymoon year. The politician needs to get acquainted with his job and make new plans. This is the moment to introduce your project to him. Year 2 and year 3, he is doing his job. But year 4, the party politics start to play a very important role. For example, he might be very busy with issues as party candidate lists and the party campaign. Not your project is on top of his priorities. To make it more complicated, we have to deal with 4 different political cycles. The national cycle, the election of the provinces, the election of the water authorities, and the elections of the municipalities. As you can see in year 2, at the same moment, the national stakeholder is in year 4, the province stakeholder is in year 1, the stakeholder of the water authority is in year 2 and 3, and the municipality stakeholder is in year 1. So, the politician interests and needs in year 2 are quite different. Bearing in mind all these principles of stakeholder involvement and other issues, I would like to end my presentation with a short video clip of the project Overdiepse-Polder. A great example of community involvement. All principles of stakeholder involvement and other issues happened there. The project was designed by the inhabitants, 18 farmers. The result was that those 18 farmers were relocated, 10 out of the polder and 8 on a new mound in the polder. This meant a big agricultural reconstruction of the polder. I will start with a video clip of 3 minutes in which you can see the successful results of that farmer's involvement. Now it's very complicated. Brian?
It's there. Sorry. Right.
Lowering a dike in the Netherlands. You don't hear that often, because doesn't it rain heavily more often? And more water flows through the rivers. On top of that, the sea level is rising, so it's hardly time to lower a dike. Yet it does happen in the Overdiepse polder at Waspik. Statistically, we expect very high water levels in Dutch rivers once every 25 years. It happened in 1993 and 1995. To avoid problems in the future, it's important to be prepared. The Netherlands is preparing by creating room for the rivers at times of extreme flooding. How does that work in the Overdiepse polder? Well, they've been working hard in the polder over the past few years to make it suitable to store water when it's really necessary. Farms have been built on terps for the farmers who remain in the polder. Old farmhouses have been demolished. And on the other side of the polder, a new high dike is being constructed. The last phase of the project is to lower the 6-kilometer-long old dike by no less than 3 meters. During extreme flooding, farmers will be warned well in advance to move their cows inside. Because during extremely high water, there's a chance the water will flow over the lower dike into the polder. Because the polder can store water, no flooding will occur until beyond Den Bosch. There's room for 9 billion liters of mass water in the Overdiepse polder. Compared to the past, this will lower the water level by about 27 centimeters on the Bergse Maas next to the polder. How do you get the water out of the polder again? The Water Board has agreed with farmers that after flooding the polder will be dry again in 6 weeks. This is how it will happen. First, the water level of the river will fall, and therefore also reduce the water in the polder, at least till the level of the lower dike. Then this lock will be opened, and the water can flow back to the Bergse Maas. 5 pumps will also assist in making the polder water-free. After the visible water is gone, the fields and meadows will still be waterlogged. Drainage pipes, buried everywhere in the ground, extract the excess water, and the polder will become completely dry via ditches and the central pumping station. The Overdiepse polder project is part of the national program Room for the River and will be completed well before the winter of 2015. For more information, please go to the Brabant Delta Water Board website, www.brabantsedelta.nl.
Seeing this clip always makes me very proud. All the 4 principles of stakeholder engagement were part of this project. First, strong leadership of the Water Authority and the local community of farmers, led by Mr. Nol Heijmeijer. He is a farmer over there. The open-mindedness principle. The farmers came to my ministry with new plans, and together a new plan was made. The inclusive principle. Inhabitants of the polder who disagreed with the plans could always give their opinion, and solutions were found. The responsibility principle. Farmer Nol Heijmeijer and the Water Authority kept communicating with all the stakeholders involved from start to finish, and always took all stakeholders' opinions very seriously. Thank you for your attention.